A lot of people think that you have to choose between either getting big or getting strong, and you can't be at the top ends of both at the same time. But in reality, this is pretty far from the truth. And the idea mainly comes from those rep range charts that everyone's seen online, but that does not reflect how muscle actually grows. And in this video, I'm going to show you how strength and hypertrophy overlap and how to actually train to maximize both at the same time. And muscle can grow across a wide range of reps as long as mechanical tension and your effort is actually high. This means that you're actually training close to failure. And this is shown through lots of research on hypertrophy. Studies have shown that reps ranging from 5 to 30, if taken close to failure, can literally cause very similar amounts of growth. So let's start with how you should actually be training if your goal is to get big and strong at the same time. The first thing to understand is that you don't need to live in super high rep ranges to build muscle. A lot of my training sits between the 5 to 8 rep range because it's heavy enough to drive strength while still also being very effective for hypertrophy. And that range lets you generate high mechanical tension, keeping technique solid, and you're able to progress in load over time without any sort of unnecessary fatigue that you might get from higher reps. And if I'm really trying to get strong on a specific lift, I might even go lower than that. Sometimes I might even go as low as 4 reps with 1 in reserve, especially if the goal is to improve strength on a particular movement, which is something I've been doing, for example, on my preacher curl. And the point isn't to just cycle rep ranges, but it's to use lower reps as a tool to increase tension and actually make progression possible without just adding junk volume on top. And this is the same way I help program for my clients inside my hypertrophy program, which is linked in the description. Now, once load and rep ranges are set up properly, our next priority is form and how consistent you are with your movements. One of the biggest reasons that people stall is because they're constantly changing exercises or really trying to force weight increases before they've actually mastered the movement. And our goal is to build muscle, and progressive overload is a byproduct of building muscle and that process, not something that you can force every single session. If the stimulus is good and the muscle is adapting, strength will naturally come over time. And this is exactly why I treat lifting as a skill, and I try to get better every single session. I want my setup, my execution, and my range of motion to look the same every single session. So I actually know that my muscles are growing bigger and my technique isn't changing in order to try and lift heavier weights. When technique is consistent, you can actually track your real progress because the only thing changing is how much force you can produce and not how bad your technique is. And this also ties into leaving reps in reserve. You don't need to max out every set to failure constantly to try and grow muscle. Leaving a couple of reps in reserve can help keep your technique clean, manage fatigue, and also makes long-term progress a little bit more sustainable for you. And it can even help with the quality of your session for the rest of your exercises as well. For example, if I'm maxing out to failure on bench press, then my tricep, shoulder, and chest lifts in the future could be compromised within the rest of that lift. Now, the next piece is training frequency, which a lot of people might underestimate. Training a muscle more often gives you more chances to actually practice the movement, apply mechanical attention, and make small adaptations that add up over time. So for most people, training a muscle twice a week should be the bare minimum. A good example of this would be push-pull leg split, which each muscle group gets hit about 2 times across the week, and it works well because you can spread the volume out, it reinforces your technique, and avoids cramming too much work in a single session. But you could push your frequency to even 3 times a week, and this can work extremely well, which is personally what I really love to do. And as long as volume and recovery is managed properly, you're accounting for how many sets you can recover from, then you don't really need to worry about doing too much in a single session. And this can look like a 6-day upper lower split where each muscle group gets trained 3 times over the week, which would be upper lower, upper lower, upper lower rest, or even a full body split, either 3 times a week or every other day, where you train everything multiple times and just have lower per session volume. And higher frequency works because you're practicing the lifts more often without destroying yourself completely with volume, and instead of trying to do all your volume in one day, you just spread it out and you keep your performance higher and make progression easier to manage over the long run. Now this brings us to volume, which is where most people completely mess up. A lot of lifters think that if they're not progressing, they need to add more sets, but in reality, they're probably doing more volume than they can recover from. There isn't like a weekly volume quota you really need to hit to maximize your gains. What matters is just doing the amount of work that you can actually recover from and repeat that consistently week after week. And if your performance is dropping and there's a lot of pressure on your joints, or you constantly feel run down, that's probably a sign that your volume is way too high relative to your recovery. And this is exactly why people schedule in deload weeks as well, but I find this completely unnecessary. Most people probably don't need to be scheduling deloads at all, because you need to be able to manage your volume and your loads and your reps in reserve to where you're able to actually recover from workout to workout and not have to schedule in these unnecessary deloads. Having to do a deload is literally exhibit A of you're doing too much volume, more volume than you can actually recover from within your next session or week. So when you put this all together, getting big and getting strong really aren't separate goals. You don't really need to have special strength phases or completely different sort of training styles for growing muscle and getting strong at the same time. If you are trying to become a power lifter and progress in the 3 specific lift, which is squat, bench, deadlift, then it would make sense to have a little bit of a different structure. But other than that, train with challenging loads, keep your technique consistent, and train often enough to be able to adapt and do volume that you can actually recover from, because muscle growth is the priority and your strength just follows along. And if you want the same framework that I use with my clients laid out step by step without having to guess or overthink, I cover everything inside my hypertrophy program, which is again link in the description.